Hey everybody, what's up, and welcome back to Creating Crime Time, and more importantly, welcome back to the 25 Days of True Crime. So today's case, we're going to be talking about Clementine Barnabet. Who is that? Well, this one definitely is going to be a fun ride. We'll just say that. And also, the Church of Sacrifice is a big part of this case. Anywho, so Clementine Barnabet. She was born in 1894, and she lived in St. Martinville, Louisiana. She was born to Raymond Barnabet and Nina Porter. She also had 3 brothers. One of them, his name is Zephyrin, and he is very important in this case. So, the only thing that's really known about her early life is that her father, Raymond, abused their entire family, and that they would end up moving to Lafayette, Louisiana in 1909. So, in this time span in Louisiana, we have axe murders happening between 1911 and 1912. And these were in towns all along the Southern Pacific Railroad line running through Louisiana and Texas. And there was a minimum of 12 African American families that were murdered in their homes during this time. And all of the murders occurred at night with an axe, and the axe was used to fracture the skull of the victims. And there was only one person that was ever punished for these crimes, and that would be Clementine Barnabet. So while they were investigating these crimes that happened, initially, it was her father, Raymond, that was arrested on suspicion of murdering a 4-person family, the Andrus family, who had been killed in February 1911 in Lafayette, Louisiana. Well, he was released for insufficient evidence, but he would then be rearrested months later and ultimately convicted of the Andrus murders. See, this is the weird part, because his daughter Clementine and Zephyrin, they both testified against him, claiming he returned home with blood on his clothes, boasting about the Andrus murders, and their father's attorney filed for an appeal after he was convicted, but he was held in jail, obviously awaiting his new trial. So, now that was in February. In November, while their father was imprisoned, Norbert and Asima Randall of Lafayette were murdered with their 4 children in a manner that was very similar to the previous slayings. So Clementine lived a few blocks away, and she came under suspicion due to blood that was left on a latch on the fence of her house, and bloody clothes were found in her bedroom. While Clementine and Zephyrin both were held in custody, the axe murders continued to happen. Well, these axe murders would be very crucial for this area in itself. It is now definitely a part of their culture, and their town history is something so brutal that these families went through. And it was all in the middle of the night. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you back to kind of like the beginning, but kind of not the beginning. So Clementine and her brother Zephyrin began their own church, and she was 17 at the time, and this was called the Church of Sacrifice. Now, this is actually a cult, and this cult provided an opportunity for male and female members to become one and just become a part of something that was better for them. And Clementine was one of the leaders for this organization. So, after they create this church, well, the trouble starts beginning in Louisiana. In 1909, in Rain, Louisiana, they saw the first murders This was the murder of Edna Opelousas and her 3 children. And this would be the first case that's truly linked to the rest of them. And now these cases severely haunt this general area. So, fast forward a little bit to January of 1911. The authorities in West Crowley, Louisiana, they uncover what the local press refer to as the most brutal murder in history section. So, in this section, they talk about different murders. One of them is that of Walter Byers, his wife, and their small son, and they were found dead in their beds. Their skulls were split open by a swing of an axe. Their blood drenched their beds. There was bloody footprints drilled across the floor. The locked door in their house indicated that the killer came through the window. And there was also something very eerie about their room. There was a bucket of blood that sat in the corner. And the still bloody murder weapon lay at the head of the bed. So everything was still in the room. The only thing that wasn't was the murderer. These murders were committed in a poor area of town, and most of the time these murders would be dismissed. But in this case, because it was so brutal, it was such a brutal execution, they weren't dismissed. Now, a little over a month after that is when the murder of the Andrus family happens in Lafayette, and they were killed in the same manner. 1 month after that one in San Antonio, Texas, they saw the murder of Alfred and Elizabeth Cassaway along with their 3 children. So, in this span of not just having that first crime in 1909, from 1911 to 1912, there was almost a dozen African American families that were slaughtered by an axe murderer. And this is when, after all these murders happen, this is when Raymond is a prime suspect, which we have discussed. So, when he becomes the prime suspect, it's not just his children that are involved. His mistress also throws him under the bus. She suggested to a friend that he might have a connection to the murders after they had gotten into a fight. So his little side chick is the one that was like, boo, you're the one that's guilty of this. You can go away and murder and rot. And after this comes to light, this is when he goes to trial for the crime in October of that year of 1911. And this is when Clementine and Zephyrin testify against him. So during this court case, this is when Clementine recalls the night where he returned covered in blood and slinging threats to his own family, and Zephyrin, her brother, corroborated this, adding that their father bragged about murdering this family. The siblings, Zephyrin and Clementine, asserted that their own lives were in danger if their father was set free. So, however, even when he sat in jail, now obviously from previously telling you that another murder had taken place in November, so not even a month after this, and that was the murder of Norbert Randall and his wife and 3 children, and his nephew was also killed just as brutally. So this one is just a little bit different. The first 5 in this case were killed by a swing of an axe, but Norbert was the only one that was shot in the head. So this case really kind of like differs from the rest of them. Everybody else was killed by a swing of an axe, but Norbert was shot in the head. So suspicion from Raymond shifted to Clementine and Zephyrin, and these 2 were not liked around town. They were just described by neighbors as filthy, shifty degenerates. Nobody liked them. They had such a poor reputation in town. The sheriff at the time, the Lafayette Parish Sheriff Louis Lacoste, he was further disturbed by another detail that came to light. So when the police brought Raymond, their father, in for arrest, Clementine's clothes had been smeared in blood from the Andrus murders. Clementine. So what Clementine did is she claimed that her father was wiping his hands on her. And the sheriff had doubts from like the first second he saw that. He knew something was up with it. Now, fast forward. Yeah, we're going to fast forward to 1912. Clementine's arrested on suspicion of murder, and when they searched the Barnabet house, they found more clothes drenched in blood and covered in what seemed to be human brains. The latch on the door was slick with blood as well, and along with the latch on the fence. So Zephyrin could provide an alibi for the murders, but Clementine couldn't. So because of this, Clementine sat in jail, but once again, the murders continued while she was in jail. So also in January of 1912, there was 3 more families that were slain. There was the Broussard family. They were the first ones that first happened. That was Felix Broussard, his wife, and their 3 children. This incident happened in Lake Charles, Louisiana. And in this one, their hands were splayed apart by pieces of wood, so they had wood in between each finger, and a message was left written on the wall near them. And there's speculation whether it's done in pencil or blood, but in this, it declared a version of Psalm 9:12, which is in the King James Bible. And on the wall it said, "When he maketh the inquisition for blood, he forgetteth not the cry of the humble." This was signed off with a human 5, so it's either as a number 5 or a handprint. That is also up for speculation as well. So naturally, after this happened, this signature, the human 5, led authorities to believe the perpetrator of slaying was a group. And newspapers at the time were running the story about how the crimes were linked to a voodoo ritual, and the press suggested that the violence wrought against the deceased families was done as a human sacrifice, and it utilized the importance of the number 5 because everything kind of happened in 5s. This further fueled rumors that Clementine was a part of a cult called the Church of Sacrifice, which was said to believe one could obtain riches and other wealth through human sacrifice. And this cult was led by a Pentecostal revival preacher named Reverend King Harris. However, when they asked about his involvement in the murders in the cult, and Harris was appalled to hear people thought his sermons could have inspired such horrific crimes. So in April of 1912, this is when Clementine gave a full confession. She ended up owning up to the murder of 17 people, and she confirmed people's belief that voodoo played a part in it. She also said that she obtained a charm that was supposed to protect her in her pursuit of killing. Further, she claimed that she had accomplices and that they drew lots to see who would be chosen to commit the murders, so she wouldn't be doing it alone. While she said she went so far to kill the children of the family to save them from pain of being orphans, her full motive for the murders was never completely established. Even with her confession, her story was very flimsy. Her testimony against her father hurt her credibility, so she wasn't really like a reliable source when it came to this stuff. Her story after this lessened by fact, and in the investigation into her alleged accomplices went nowhere. Arrests were made, but if the group behind the human 5, if there was a group, they would never be found. Howard E. Bruner, which was the DA at the time, believed that some of the crimes of the period were probably copycat crimes, and nonetheless he felt that Clementine was morally depraved and rightly guilty of all she confessed. However, public confusion surrounding the crime probably led to a great deal of misinformation, such as the actual existence of the Church of Sacrifice. Still, once voodoo had been confessed to, there was no stopping the train of thought, and this really embraced a heavily racist context in the area. The residents of Lafayette were all too prepared to label the murders as voodoo sacrifices, and a belief Clementine cemented by naming a voodoo priest, Joseph Thibodeau, as the one who provided her with her invisibility charm, and she further insisted that he planted the ideas of crimes in her head, but he denied any involvement. So the longer she sat in jail, the more murders she confessed to. She admitted to 35 killings, but with every story she told, the more the details changed. And despite claiming insanity, Clementine was sentenced to life at the age of only 19. So, in 1913, Clementine attempts to escape from the Louisiana penitentiary. She was caught the very same day, and it was the only attempt she ever made, and by all accounts of her in prison, she was a model prisoner. Not that she served for a very long time, despite her lifelong sentences, but it's also known that Clementine received a procedure. There's no details about what this procedure is, but because of the nature and the time, people believe that it was a lobotomy that was performed on her, and this was a common medical practice. However, there's no descripted procedure, and it was said to have restored her to a normal condition, which is why people thought she had a lobotomy. Now, 10 years after she was in prison, she was released on good behavior, and after she was released, there's nothing really known about where she was and what happened to her. Her death is unknown. So, my lovely friends, that is the story of Clementine Barnabet. So, I hope you guys have enjoyed today's little crime tale. This one was very different, and I wanted to cover this one mainly due to the fact because of not just the severity of it, but because of how extremely different it is from the other cases I've covered. Now, I've covered an unsolved, I've covered different serial killers, and I covered a now identified unsolved case, but this one, because of the brutality and how voodoo played along with it, I felt that it was appropriate to especially put during my 25 days of true crime, but so other people understand that it's not just newer crimes I'm going to be talking about. I'm going to be talking about vintage crimes too, especially because the span of these crimes was between 1909 to 1912, and that the crimes were still happening even when she went to jail. So, and the same thing with her father. Her brother, Zephyrin, was never charged. Her father was released from jail, but to this day, Clementine Barnabet is really known as a fundamental part of the haunted towns in the South, and that stigma where it comes to voodoo being associated with murders in and around Louisiana. So I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. I know I said that already, but I just wanted to say it again. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button, turn your bell notification on to all. Definitely hit the like button. That way I know you like it. And I hope you guys are excited for more days of the 25 days of true crime, because I know I am. And I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye, you guys.